Welcome to the Dearly Discarded podcast. I'm your host. My name's Jared St. Clair, and today I've got a couple of people that I want to introduce you to, and they are from up north in Canada. Most of the people that I've interviewed so far have been here in the U.S., but we've had a Scottish person on. We've had a couple of Brits. We've had one other Canadian, and now we've got two more that I want to introduce you to. And part of the reason I bring that up at all, and not that it really matters where these injuries occur, but what I think does matter is that these injuries occur all over the world. This is certainly not just an American problem, even though I'm an American podcaster. So as much as possible, I want to cast that net out as far as possible and grab stories from wherever we can, because I believe that this is a non-political problem, in my opinion, although it is often treated politically. And we shouldn't really care all that much if someone's in Russia or Tokyo or America or Canada. We are all human beings living this life, and we need these stories to be heard all across the world. So when you hear what you're about to hear, and you want to help, one of the simplest things that you can do is simply just share this show with anyone and everyone that you believe needs to hear it. And I'll tell you that I think everybody needs to hear it. So get it out there, and let's try to let these powerful and important voices that have so often been muted heard. So that's what we're doing today on Dearly Discarded podcast, and we're going to introduce to you something that I'll want you to see in the future, and that is a documentary that these two fine women are working on today. Today I've got for you Jaimie Killen and Kristin Ditzel, and welcome to the Dearly Discarded podcast, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
So I didn't know who you were until 5 minutes ago, and that's often the case, most times the case when I do this show. But we usually have at least one mutual friend in Bree Dressen, and oftentimes more. And we've already had a good laugh about a couple of the other friends that we've made through this process. So it's I feel like I know you just a little bit, but I'm really excited to let you tell your story here. Let's start with what I always start with, and that is the first question. When did the vaccine injury occur, and which of the two of you, for people that are unaware, got injured?
Hi. Me, Kristin. Well, both of us got injured. Our lives are both really heavily affected, but my brain in particular. So I got my first Pfizer shot March 16th, 2021, which was early rollout for healthcare practitioners in Canada. And I dropped on site within 20 minutes and lost full control of my limbs. And
within 20 minutes of the first shot, right?
First and only shot.
First and only,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I was one of the lucky ones because it was heavily documented because I was on site. It started with an anaphylactic-like reaction that occurred over the first couple days and heavy neurological symptoms that declined for months after, that left me with a severe brain injury. So it crossed my blood-brain barrier and just attacked multiple areas of my brain.
Now, you said healthcare workers, so you were in healthcare at the time. What were you doing?
I was a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so right down my alley then.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, love herbs over here.
Love them.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing, though. So you're up in Canada. Canada was pretty heavy-handed politically on these shots and quarantines and everything else. There were a lot of places I looked around me and thought, well, at least I'm not there during COVID.
Oh, my God.
So
Canada was one of those places.
Sad times up here for sure.
Yeah. So was there a lot of pressure, or were you signing up because you felt like it was the right thing to do? What was your mindset at the time?
There was a lot of political pressure. Obviously, with my background, it wasn't something that I was really that excited about. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of pressure. There was pressure knowing that it was coming down the pipes as far as our regulated bodies. We were very restricted as far as practicing. We were, at that point, changing our clothes in between patients. We hadn't been allowed to work for quite some time, had got back into work, and we were just kind of scared of losing the ability to work again and making sure that our patients really felt safe.
Okay. And so again, as you stated, March was very early in the rollout. Not that many people at that point had one of these things. And what I find a little bit interesting about yours is that oftentimes what I've heard is that it was that second shot that really kind of kicked things into full gear in terms of injury. But for you, it was a near immediate thing, which is pretty interesting. So what were your thoughts, and what were you being told by medical doctors when this all happened 20 minutes after the jab?
I just assumed that it was a normal anaphylactic reaction, and I thought that I would be fine. So I had neurological symptoms come up within the first 12, 24 hours, but they didn't really start piecing together for about a week, where the people outside of me looked at me and said, okay, no, there's a problem. I'm a ridiculously positive person, and it takes a lot to get me on the dark side. So I just kept thinking, I'm fine. I'll be fine. I just kept saying to my colleagues, I'll be back to work on Tuesday. I'll be back to work. Just tell my patients I need another day. And it took a bit for me to admit that something was more extreme than that. And doctors, they didn't really know what was going on. My breathing was fine the entire time. So my anaphylactic reaction, besides like rash and stuff, was very neurological.
Yeah, it wasn't. Looking back now, you can see that there was a lot of stuff going on that we wouldn't have very likely acknowledged, because you would have just thought, oh, like just dismissed it like that's not relevant or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so it was anaphylactic, but not like a normal anaphylactic. It was very odd.
All right. And so then obviously you weren't back to work on Tuesday.
No.
I recently, like 15 minutes ago, watched the trailer to your upcoming documentary, Invisible Fences. And, in that trailer, there's some documentation, some video of what you were dealing with in terms of your physical and I would say mental and neurological issues that you were dealing with, which seemed incredibly extreme from the video. What kind of walk us through, if you don't mind, that first week or so after the shot, once you recognized this wasn't just an allergic reaction, there was more going on. What were you seeing? What was happening?
I kind of felt like we knew that people were having flu-like symptoms after. So I kind of wrapped myself into that category. And just rested, but I had weird symptoms as far as I couldn't turn my head. I actually couldn't lift my head. I was just exhausted, and I had some girlfriends come over to visit me about 5, well, not 6.
4 days.
4 days. It was only like 4 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 days later. And I was trying to talk to them, and I couldn't communicate, and I just kind of slid down my cupboards. And that's when we really realized, like, something that's really wrong here.
And that was after she'd been in the hospital twice. Like, they took her to the hospital immediately after she reacted, and then was released after, like, Benadryl, epi, and then sent home. And then 24 hours after that, all of her symptoms returned. And so she went back up to the hospital, and they treated her with the exact same thing and sent her home again. So then you had like your daughter's birthday in the midst of all of that. So you were kind of distracted with that. And then it was like, so it was about day 4 that things just kind of went sideways. Like something just, I personally wasn't there, but a couple of her friends were here, and she just like wasn't communicating. Like her speech was gapping, and you had some weird, like just disorientation, kind of confusion. And I mean, I guess what they call now brain fog, right?
Yeah. I hate that word, brain fog. Like it doesn't justify how,
it's not really a fog. Hey, it's like a swamp.
Yeah. It's like when your cells are not firing it's almost like when I feel it, it's almost like a visualization of death of these cells. You know, our cells are supposed to be these like beautiful, well-wired machines. And when they're not working properly, it's really, you know, it's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I was saying before we hit record, I've been so blessed to meet so many amazing people who've been injured and family members of injured people. And it's not a particularly easy thing to do this podcast because I hear so much tragic stuff, right? And and certainly it's easier for me to do the podcast than for the guests that I have on the podcast, I'm sure. But what has been really interesting to me is that there are so many similarities between people who have been injured, and in terms of the injuries themselves, there's a lot of similarities, and certainly some people it's, you know, cardiovascular stuff, like myocarditis. A lot of people, and it seems the bulk of the people that I've met with have had more neurological issues, like what you're describing. But one of the things that seems to be a very similar occurrence is and I'm really curious how you're going to answer this because I don't know what your story is really yet, is the way that people have been treated by medical doctors, hospitals, facilities post-injury with any combination of potential gaslighting or just being told that there's no way that that's what this is a coincidence or whatever else. So yours happened 20 minutes after you were injected. It's relatively difficult, I would anticipate, for people to say, well, I had nothing to do with it, it's just a coincidence. But how did it go down? What were the responses of practitioners?
Yeah, you would think so. I immediately got a new family doctor because my family doctor was a little bit confused with what was going on. And I got a great new doctor that has been supportive and highly educated about vaccine injuries.
I think you should tell him why your first doctor was confused.
Yeah, my first, it was just awful. Yeah, my first doctor, he gave me a pregnancy test. Like I've had a hysterectomy, and and his thought was I should give her a pregnancy test. Maybe she's hysterical. Maybe I don't know. And he just thought that I had a lot of anxiety. Which I had never suffered with before. And he thought that maybe I had vertigo, even though dizziness has never been a symptom of mine. So, you know, I'm lucky that I have a medical background, so I knew how to advocate for certain things. So I immediately, when he said vertigo, I called him back into my hospital room and I said, look, like I need to make sure that you're not putting that in my file. You're not discussing this in my charts. And then we called around and we got me another doctor right away.
Yeah.
The local neurologist was wonderful.
Yeah. Your initial care in the hospital was not bad.
Yeah.
Right. It's everything kind of following that.
Totally.
Was not great. But yeah, you did have a great neurologist in the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning, she was very supportive.
In the end, not so much.
In the end, not so much. Yeah, she immediately realized that her general neurology testing wasn't sufficient. So she researched a vascular neurologist because at this point, I think she knew it had crossed my blood-brain barrier and wanted to get me more help. And that's when things spiraled downhill. And
in terms of your care?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you mind walking us through that just a little bit?
The neurologist that I saw, it was a 5-hour drive. And so at that point, we didn't realize that I couldn't be in a car, that travel was just not good for my system. So by the time that I arrived there, I was essentially just a ball.
Yeah, she got way worse on the car ride to go see this other neurologist. So the car ride and all the movement and the motion and the sound and everything that she didn't realize amplified her injury, like just ramped it up. So then that's when you started like convulsions.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like she didn't convulse. She would have like a shaky leg for a little bit, but then it was like
full
body, right? Yeah, so you were not in good shape when you got there.
No.
And then she went to go see this neurologist. And
I remember going with, like, my parents drove me, and I was going over my will with them on the ride. Like, that was the first time that I thought, okay, I'm not going to get out of this. You need to make sure that this happens with my kids. Like, that was the first time I started that talk. And when we walked into the building, I remember being so overwhelmed by the lights and the sounds of the office and the phone and the clicking of the computer that I was all I wanted to do was to hide underneath a chair in the waiting room. Very similar to some of my severely autistic patients that would present in my office. And it was really terrifying, and terrifying for my parents that have always seen me healthy, right?
Yeah.
And that neurologist, we were there for maybe 3 hours, and she was dismissive. She diagnosed me with functional neurological disorder. She refused to say it was connected to the vaccine. She said I would be better, maybe. Most people get better.
You were there for 3 hours, but how much time did you actually spend with her? Like, how much time did she spend in the room with you?
Like 10, 15 minutes, maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a 10-minute, 15-minute conversation doesn't check over anything, doesn't ask barely any questions, and then just says, this is what's happening. Bye.
And her resident was horrified. Her resident was amazing. I would love to actually find him and see where he is in his practice, because
that's not a bad idea.
Right? Like, he knew, he took the test to further levels, and he could tell what was going on, whereas she went right back to that basic set of reflexes and was just like dismissive, and you're fine. And then when I gave her, the vaccine compensation papers from Canada, because I'm self-employed and I'm a single mom. And, at this point I was trying not to lose my home already. Right. And, we're all kind of on a paycheck to paycheck thing with the economy right now. And I was trying to get that paperwork processed, and she essentially threw them in my face. Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't sound a whole lot different than what I've heard from so many other people, where maybe their injury occurred, weeks, or the symptoms occurred weeks later, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so then we're over 2 years now out from this event, and you're working on a documentary. There's a few other questions I want to ask, but I think I want to fast forward for just a moment. At 2 years and a month-ish since this happened, where are you at with your health now? What's changed?
Well, I'm no longer using a cane. Sometimes I need it.
Sometimes you need it.
Okay.
Yesterday we went for a walk.
You didn't take it.
I didn't take it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's huge, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of positives. I can communicate with you.
With her eyes open. She couldn't talk with her eyes open for so long. You still have moments, but it's so much better.
Most people close their eyes when they talk to me anyway, so that'd be fine.
And did you take your earphones yesterday?
No.
So when she leaves the house, she always has to have like noise canceling headphones in, because she's hypersensitive to loud sounds, right? She'll wear a hat a lot of the times just to block out light and motion, because she's hypersensitive to motion.
Still a lot of sensory sensitivity.
As I'm like waving my hand next to her. Oh God. I'm usually much more self-aware.
Great.
You don't like have to hide behind buildings and stuff when we walk downtown anymore.
That's true.
Right? Winning.
less hiding behind objects.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can go into some public places. Occasionally I can go to the grocery store. It's a big feat.
Yeah.
We traveled. We went down to Mexico to go get stem cells. That was possible. It was very difficult.
We did it.
But we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really hard.
It was really hard. Yeah.
Airplanes are not her friend.
Oh, I can't imagine.
They're so loud, right?
Yeah.
And it's so just, there's so much.
They're so loud. If you don't have any neurological issues, it's no, I don't know of anybody that loves jumping on a jet, flying, especially for an extensive length of time. But yeah, the things I've heard about the kind of sensory overload that happens and the sensory sensitivity, again, some of these things are just so familiar. I've heard them so many times
and
now.
we had, like, in the group that we talk to regularly, we've got a group of injured people, and it's all the same, right? Like the biggest complaints are migraines, which Kristin has, joint pain, which Kristin has, elevated heart rates. There's a lot of elevated heart rate stuff, like POTS, which Kristin has. What else? The convulsions are kind of like, I think everyone in the group has them with the neurological symptoms, but some of them are internal and some of them are external. Like those internal vibrations. You get both, right?
Yeah, mine are mainly external.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they say that the COVID vaccines, I've seen this, are the leading cause of coincidence. Right. And it seems that there's also this interesting thing that I don't know that I've conducted an interview with someone who's been injured yet that hasn't said that they were initially diagnosed with anxiety. So I'm almost wondering if anxiety is the leading symptom of this stuff, because that's what it always gets.
You have anxiety,
right?
Did it start after your COVID shot,
right?
Yeah, it's a mental health issue. You have to be crazy because safe and effective, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So over the last 2 years, we got past this, crazy neurological appointment you had, very close to the injury. Obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious. I assume you've seen many practitioners since for a variety of different potential treatments and things like that. What have you found success with? What's worked? What hasn't worked? I know a lot of people listening are your fellow injured that certainly are looking for options in their own care as well.
I was very lucky because I was involved in the natural health world. So I had colleagues coming to my house giving me acupuncture appointments every day. I had my my one colleague was a chiropractor. And so she was at my house adjusting my neck because I was throwing my body out of alignment. Sometimes I was dislocating my wrists from my convulsion.
Yeah, I forgot about your wrist.
Right? Oh, it was awful.
Oof.
Yeah. So I was lucky that I had those treatments. And I think that number one, it's important to have that balance of care. And so many people, we're looking for what is it that's going to make us better. But there is not one thing that can align the body. Right? It's a dance of multiple symptoms and multiple treatments. So I use my acupuncture and my chiro, and I get a lot of osteopathic treatments that make a big difference, craniosacral. Those are the things that keep me functioning emotionally and physically. But I did the series through Dr. Corey. I took Maraviroc, and that made a massive difference for me.
Yeah, you were on a pretty strict protocol.
Yeah.
And it was horrible.
It was horrible.
It was really hard on her body, and it did make a big difference.
Yeah. And that's that HIV protocol. And then I also got stem cells.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Mexico is where you got the stem cells. Have you just been for one?
I originally went to Panama. So almost immediately after my injury, my family got together, swooped me up, and brought me to Panama. And
which
that
was amazing.
Saved my life without a doubt.
Yeah.
I don't think that I would have survived if I didn't have them. I was 3 months out. I already had muscle wasting. I think I would have been online to the similar diagnosis of some of us that are getting ALS and stuff. Like, I was in really bad shape.
You were.
And after I got the stem cells, I regained the ability to lift my head. And I remember the first time I looked at my daughter and not even consciously realizing that I hadn't even seen the faces of my children.
Yeah, because she was stuck down. Like, we have pictures of her that she's standing beside her dad and looking up like this. Yeah. Like she couldn't. It was really weird.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3.
And how old are they?
I have 2 18-year-olds and a 14-year-old.
Okay.
So thank goodness they're older and they can feed themselves and feed me. But
2 years ago, they were a little bit younger, and it was pretty impactful for them, for sure.
Oh, I can't imagine. How are they doing with all this?
It's rough. It's a lot for kids to go through. And
yeah, it is. And they just want to be kids, and they should be able to just be kids, right? Like and
like when I can't go downstairs to put the food that we've cooked in the fridge because at nighttime I literally can't walk downstairs. And so your mom's always texting you at 11 o'clock at night, did you put the chicken away? Right? Like you got to cook tonight. Like there's things on their plate that they shouldn't necessarily have on their plate, but they're also things that are giving them a lot of resilience and life skills. And
they're really good at grocery shopping.
They're really good at grocery shopping.
And they're really good at carrying their mom up to bed.
Yeah. Like sometimes my son literally puts me over his shoulder and carries me to bed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to ask some of those questions because I think people listening maybe that aren't as familiar with these stories, because again, unfortunately, there's so many similarities in these stories. If you haven't heard a bunch of them like I have, it's probably a little hard to wrap your head around the complete life-changing impact of this. I mean, everything gets upside down, and it doesn't just impact. I love what you said in the beginning. One is physically injured, but both of your lives were injured, and certainly your children's lives, and I'm sure beyond that as well. We've mentioned your parents as well, right? So there's all kinds of people that get impacted by this stuff.
Sure, yeah.
So then now, the first I saw of either of you was this little 5-minute trailer that'll be linked in the description of the podcast for anyone that would like to watch it, for a documentary that you're currently working on that is called Invisible Fences. One thing that I am so grateful for right now with what has transpired with these vaccines is that we do live in an age where we have a lot of potential to expose the truth, if indeed we can get past censorship and some of the other issues that we've dealt with. And of course, that's why we have this podcast. Podcasts, for whatever reason, seem to still be relatively uncensored. And so we're able to get the information out there here. And while we can't put a lot of this stuff on YouTube, we can put it on places like Rumble, where if you're listening to this show, by the way, and you'd like to see video, you'd like to actually see the people that I interview, then Rumble is the place to do that. All of the shows are up there as videos. And of course, documentaries are a really amazing potential opportunity to expose this information to people. So the first question I have is, why did you decide that you were going to put in the effort to make a documentary? It's no small feat, as I understand it.
Well, in the beginning, I run my own multimedia company in Nelson. So in the beginning, Kristin was just having these really weird symptoms. So I just started filming them for like medical purposes. And just because it was really strange what was going on. And a lot of the people that I spoke to about her injury didn't really believe me. And it is, and I've said this a lot of times, that, you really do have to see it to believe it. Yeah. It is very odd. I've never in my life experienced anything like this. I've never seen anyone, have this kind of illness. Yeah. So I started recording it, and we started just kind of like getting a little bit loud on social media with it, trying to reach out to people, like letting people know that this was happening. And, we were not getting a lot of traction. We were getting a lot of heated conversations. And then one day I was just with my daughter going into a grocery store, and a friend of mine came up to me and asked me how I was doing. And during that time, I was like, you never really know how to react when somebody asks you how you are, especially during the pandemic. So I was just like, oh, I'm fine. How are you? And he was like, no, like, how are you really? Like, how's Kristin? How are you guys? And then I just started sobbing. And we had a really long conversation, and he runs a media company in town as well. Oh. And so he was like, well, I think that your guys' story is something that needs to, be expanded. And he said, I think a documentary. And I was like, I think you're right. You know, we need to get beyond what we're doing now. What we're doing now is not working. There's a lot of people out there that need help. And there's a lot of people that need to hear these stories that aren't hearing them, that because they're so censored and so blocked for whatever reason, right? Well, we know why, but, and we really want to reach there's so many people out there that
haven't even put it together.
Yeah. And that really probably need help and are alone, you know, and don't have support. Like Kristin and I have each other, right? We both have beautiful families that support us as well. But what about the people that don't have those things? Yeah. And so we're kind of on a mission to just find a way to break through all this censorship and let people know that they exist. There's way more of them than, you know, what's being told in the media, and they're everywhere. And so my friend Nate and I got together, and he's now directing and I'm producing, and we've been filming together for about a year now. And I was filming on my own for about a year previous to that. So now we've got a little bit more momentum. We've got a little team together. And we did a fundraiser not too long ago that didn't get a lot of traction because we are so censored and shadow banned that we just couldn't get a lot of people looking at it. So our goal now is to just keep trying to gain some momentum with fundraising so that we can get to these people and continue to tell these stories. And so that's where we're at right now. We just went to Guadalajara with Kristin to take her to get stem cells because she cannot continue to be part of this film if she's not healthy. So that was our priority. We filmed all of that. And our next step is to go down to Utah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and see our friend
Come
Bree.
see us.
See our friend Bree.
You're
Maybe
in Utah.
You're in Utah?
I live an hour away from Bree.
Perfect. That would
Let's
be
do
amazing.
Yeah,
so that is our next stage. And yeah, we're just fundraising to keep the momentum going because we have a lot of stuff still to film. So it's invisiblefencesfilm.com is our website, and we're taking donations on there. There's lots of options for people if they want to check it out. Our trailer is on there too if you want to watch it.
Excellent. We'll put all those links in there. So if you're driving around listening to this or whatever, when you get stopped, look at the show description and all the links for the trailer and the website and all that'll be there. So then I have to ask this question. I think it's a little different for everybody, but I'm sure I'll hear some things that I've heard before as well. When you're in a position like you're in, your primary goal obviously is trying to get your health back, right? I mean, that's got to be number one. And then while you're also trying to be a mom, and you're also trying to do these other things that, you know, that your life was about prior to all of this, but the health thing has to come first. But the documentary it's a lot of work, right? And it's a lot of work for everybody involved. It's work for you being on camera. It's also a lot of vulnerability. You certainly don't look your best in the trailer, I'll tell you that.
That is the best.
What do you mean?
I can only say that because half my friends are injured people. But I think you know what I mean, right? Like right now, this is a thing I say to Bree all the time. Bree looks amazing every time I see her. She looks fantastic.
I was thinking that today. Her hair is always
yeah, she always looks great.
Too.
And she's super well spoken. She's really good at faking it. I mean, really, that's what it boils down to. Because I know how she really feels. Exactly. We talk about this stuff.
Right?
I know what her symptoms are like. I've seen her at the end of the day sitting on her living room couch, and she looks like she just went to war.
Exactly.
And all she did was stand up for a couple of hours, right? I've seen this, and I've seen it time and time again, not just with her. It's just that I know her the best. And so, you know, while I joke around a little bit about whether or not you look great in the film, you look great right now, right? I'm looking at you now. You got a big smile on your face. And for people that are uninitiated to this, they would think, she doesn't look that bad off to me, right? But then in the trailer, I see you hobbling along on a cane. You just talk about how going to the grocery store is a real feat, which sounds ridiculous until you're there, right?
Yeah.
And then you're still going to put the energy in to put aside all of this crap you're going through and put out a documentary. So why? What's the point?
I think that the community that we've established through all of this has been so life-changing, and the pandemic was a really difficult time for everybody. And having an injury that was so controversial was very traumatic. And the only way to really get through that is to see the lighter side, like the lighter side of things. Mm-hmm. And that was possible through these groups and friendships that developed. And we want to meet those people, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We just went through something that was so crazy that it's hard to even comprehend. And we just really want to share that side of it. I just think it's so important. It's so weird. Before any of this happened, I would have been really like, I hated having my picture taken, right? Like oh my God, Jaimie did all of my social media stuff for my business. People would always say, oh, your quotes are so positive. And I'd be like, thank you. Like, I just didn't like it, right? I've always been like an extrovert in a small contained area, but it's weird how all of that stuff just falls away when it no longer matters.
It just doesn't. Yeah. And there's so much more. It's not just about, I mean, it is about you and what you're going through, and it's about everything around that, right?
Yes.
It's about our families, our friendship,
right?
The people we've met, what we've been through, like the healthcare system, what that journey has looked like, and just connecting with other people and letting them know they're not alone. Because no human should be alone or shamed for something that they're going through, right? And it's
full stop.
Yeah. And what we both personally have been through in our lives in the last 2 years, and what we have lost and what we have experienced, that in itself is astounding. And we have a lot of support. So I think every day about what people that don't have the level of support that we do are going through. And I just want to find them all. Like,
right.
That is why we're doing this, because it's so important.
It's been a really interesting journey for me, going through this process from the day I met Brianne Dressen, at a legislative meeting in hearing in Salt Lake City, talking about employer mandates for the vaccines. And I knew who she was because I'd seen her on the Ron Johnson panel, prior to that. And I knew she was a Utahn, but I had no idea if she would be at this event. And but I went because I was fully in favor of, not mandating any of this stuff. So I'm sitting there in a separate room because it was a sellout crowd, so to speak. They had 4 or 5 overflow rooms full, and then they had the main hearing room. And I was upstairs in a corner of the Capitol building watching this with my sweetheart. And we're watching a video screen of what's happening downstairs. And the very last speaker, they gave everybody, I think, a minute or 90 seconds or something like that, was Brie Dressen. And she stands up, and I'm like, I know who that is. I know who that is. We saw her on these videos. I got to meet her because when I saw her on the Ron Johnson thing, found out she was in Utah, I thought, I need someone like that on my other podcast, Vitality Radio, because I knew at that point that there were hundreds of millions of people that didn't know that this was even a possibility, that this could happen, right? And I, unfortunately, had a little bit of an insider's view and saw a lot more of this stuff happening than maybe most people did at that point. So anyway, I ran down the stairs and was like, I got to make sure I catch this lady and talk to her and get to know her. And it's been such a huge blessing in my life to have her, not just to be able to call her a friend, but to just gain so much strength from watching her fight. And what I've seen over the last year and a half since I've known her is the awareness level just blossoming beautifully so many more people
Yeah.
are now aware. I think there are very few people anymore that don't know someone that has something going on post-vaccination, right? Yeah. Even if it's not, severe stuff like what we're talking about with Kristin, but, tinnitus and headaches and fatigue and, all the things, right?
All the things.
And so the awareness is there, and, or at least it's much, much better than it was, but there's still, for me, one of the things that I find frustrating is that while a lot of people know what's going on or have seen things, there doesn't seem to be the kind of cry that needs to be heard to stop this madness and to support those who were damaged in the process.
Isn't it awful?
And I think, unfortunately, until somebody goes through, like Jaimie has had a lot of judgment with the amount of support she's given me over the last couple of years with some people in her life. And I think until you almost lose your best friend, or until your dad dies, or your child is injured, it's just easier to turn and look the other way.
Keep living life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Stay in your bubble.
Yeah.
We don't
I think we're all past that time. We're all past the time where we can just keep the blinders on and look straight ahead.
Right? Yeah, I really hope so.
Go back.
No, there's no going back for us.
No.
There's only plowing forward in full force. And that is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well,
I admire you both. I admire you both so much for doing that and for showing strength in a time of potential great weakness is really important. Are there any other things? I mean, for the people listening, what would you say they need to hear in terms of what they can do to try and support people in your shoes?
I just think that people need to have less judgment of others.
Yeah.
On all avenues.
Yeah.
And
compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all human.
Yeah.
We're all going through something, and we need community. Yeah. We need to take care of each other.
Yeah.
And
just because you don't share the same experience doesn't mean that your experience isn't valid.
Absolutely.
Right? We all have different paths, and that doesn't mean that we're different in all aspects, right? Like, we're all human beings.
Yeah, there's more common ground, I think, amongst all of us than maybe most of us are willing to admit. Yeah. And one of the things that I think is also so tragic about the COVID years that we've been dealing with is that it seems the divide has gotten greater, not smaller, through this process. In fact, much greater. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there. What I hope that this podcast does, and the reason I do the podcast, the reason I have people like yourselves on, is I hope that it just touches a few hearts and brings a few tears and gets people to feel a little bit more than just think, and become more aware and share that awareness and speak up and say what needs to be heard. So your documentary, I keep wanting to call it a podcast. I guess I'm pigeonholed in what I do on a day-to-day basis. But your documentary is going to be not just about your story. There will be other injured people that are being interviewed. Is that accurate?
Yes. The story begins with Kristin and myself, and how we have experienced her injury through our friendship, right? And then how we have come across this gigantic worldwide community of other injured people, and how that has impacted her life and essentially given her the strength to go on. And so we want to incorporate those people into this film as well, film her meeting them, talk about their lives, what their experiences have been like, and keep it very organic, very down to through the eyes of the injured, essentially, is the whole film, starting with Kristin and myself and our journey through it together.
I love that idea. That sounds amazing, and I'm really excited for the finished product to come out. So we'll have links for the website, links where you can donate, as well as a link to YouTube for the trailer that you can see, which again I just watched right before we started this interview, and it's something that you need to see and that you need to share. Get the word out. If you're listening and you want to help, those are ways that you can help, and I would highly encourage you to do that. What else would you like to share while I've got you here today?
Just thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for hearing us and for having us on your show. And we want to reach as many people as possible. We're open to doing interviews with other people as well. If anyone knows of somebody else that would like to interview us, we would love that. So all of our contact information is on our webpage as well. Excuse me, at invisiblefencesfilm.com. Kristin is like getting a little bit
I can see
shaky.
Yeah.
So usually she taps out around an hour.
If you're on the audio, I do encourage you to go to the Dearly Discarded pod on Rumble so that you can watch video, because it does put an added layer of real reality in the mix when I start to see the person I'm interviewing start to shake and not be able to control bodily motions and things like that. And Kristin, thank you for your strength, your willingness to get on camera with me and do this. I will plug you into a couple of people that I know that can hopefully help you expose your story a little bit more, get more word out on the movie. And consider me your friend and ally. If you have anything that I can do in the future, please let me know. And please look me up when you come to Utah.
Yes.
I would love to meet you both.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to let you rest, Kristin. And again, for everybody listening, all of the links will be in the show description. And go check out the website one more time, invisiblefencesfilm.com.
Yes.
Okay. Visiblefencesfilm.com. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you both so very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Have such a good day.
Absolutely. And for you listening, thank you for joining us as well. I know these stories aren't the easiest ones to hear. Please listen and please share. I appreciate you very, very much as well. I'm Jared St. Clair, and this has been the Dearly Discarded podcast.